recent years, transgender rights have become one of the more prominent topics in the battle for civil rights. At first glance, most people would assume this is similar, or even the same debate as the battle for gay rights. However, rather than largely being a discussion on marriage and family rights, transgender rights encompass so much more. Transgender people are still not fully understood, along with their history and their rights and legislation in America. Now, in order to understand the debate of transgender rights, it is best to have an understanding of what transgender means. So, what is a transgender person and what makes them the way they are? A transgender person is someone who identifies themselves as a gender different from their assigned sex at birth. This can apply to more than just identifying as the opposite gender, but most transgender individuals live within the standard gender binary. Though this is not universal, it is generally expected for a trans individual to have gender dysphoria. The DSM-5, known as the Handbook for American Psychiatry, characterizes gender dysphoria as not just identifying as a gender separate from one's assigned sex, feeling deep distress in this to the point of possible dysfunction. Knowing this basic information, one might wonder what transgender rights, specifically activism, has been like historically. One of the earliest moments in transgender activism as we know it is the publication of an independent magazine known as Transvestia. Transvestia was published through the 1960s and 1970s by Virginia Price. Price had been living as a woman since the 1930s, though she was seen as a crossdresser by most of society. Though it uses terms that have now long since been considered antiquated, the magazine promoted awareness as well as legal and political education. A key moment in transgender issues was the murder of Brandon Teena. Teena was a transgender man living in Nebraska as an often transient young adult. In 1993, he would be raped by his two friends upon being found out as biologically female, and later murdered after going to the police. Not only was this murder a direct result of transgender prejudice, it is often cited that his murder could have been prevented if police did not discriminate against him based on his identity. A similar case happened in 2011, though this would see the roles reversed. In June of that year, black transgender woman Cece McDonald will be charged with the killing of Dean Schmitz with a pair of scissors. She would accept a plea deal, landing her 41 months in prison. This case has been highly criticized based on the fact that McDonald was arguably acting in self-defense, as Schmitz was one of the group of 5 people accosting her in public with threats of violence. With the legislation of same-sex marriage in 2015, transgender people would start to naturally become more visible. This has led to a rise in legislation, both in support and in opposition to transgender rights. As far as identity rights go, the main points are name change and legal gender changes on birth certificates. These laws often vary on a state-to-state basis, thankfully with an upward trend. Currently, the only state to fully ban any change of gender on an ID or birth certificate is Tennessee, with no state reversing its progress in this field. A curious debate within transgender rights has been bathroom access. Some states recently have put forward bills restricting bathroom access to someone's assigned biological sex. One such state that has done this is North Carolina in 2016 with House Bill 2, a bill meant not only to limit transgender bathroom rights but to ban local legislation that conflicts to said bill. This was repealed in 2020. A widely considered topic in civil rights legislation is hate crimes. We do have legislation that specifically mentions gender identity, such as the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2019. Ratified in 2020, this bill included gender and gender identity in regards to targeted violence. One of the most recent roadblocks in transgender rights is medical access, specifically for treatment of minors. Law in 2021 banned all medical methods of transitional therapy, and administered by health professionals to minors. At the time of this bill's passing, 20 other states had similar bills put into legislation. Psychiatrists nationwide have, of course, opposed laws of this nature, with responses in support of these types of legislations being similar to Representative Wooten's comments comparing transgender youth to a child who comes to you and says, I want to be a cow. Transgender rights are the newest battle in the overall war for civil rights. Unlike people with a different orientation than heterosexual, their life situations are far more complex than attraction. The history of transgender rights activism does heavily coincide with gay rights, but it has diverged in key areas. Legislation has been incredibly divisive, with some progress, but also a lot of opposition in face of that progress. Seems like all civil rights issues, this one is not due to be resolved anytime soon.